You may already know that I've made some tutorial videos for surf. These tutorials have only been for beginners and they only cover the absolute basics, the complete foundation of starting to surf. I've had a few responses from quite a few people in the community saying that as much as they already know everything in these videos that I've made, they're still interested in seeing how I break down the concepts for the intermediate level of surf. There are a lot of people in the intermediate category where they've learned how to surf pretty well, but they're kind of struggling to really take their surf to the next level. So I've decided that I'm going to take each individual concept and just make a quick video about how you can understand this concept in its totality and practice how to do it well and then implement it into your surf. Just quickly, I know that there are a lot of people who want me to carry on the videos that I've made, so bring out episode 3, then 4, 5, 6, etc. But these videos take quite a long time to make, so I'd rather just get the quick videos out to produce more content without having to spend such a long time to get them out. The videos that I made, they took about 16 hours each, and they're only 7 minutes long, so it's quite a lot of work to put in. So anyway, if you haven't seen those, check those videos out. Especially if you're a beginner and you just want to learn surf, that's where you want to go. This is more for like intermediates. So the first concept that I want to talk about is one of the fundamentals that makes strafing really good. It takes the strafing from being an average strafer to being a great strafer if executed correctly. There are many things that make up a good strafe. This is just one fundamental that will improve your strafing if you implement it well. A lot of concepts in the surf community just don't have names, so I have made up my own names for a lot of the concepts that I'll be talking about. This concept in particular is called bounce. So let's learn how to bounce. Just before we get into it, if you've made it this far through the video, it's likely that you are the sort of person who wants to improve their surf. So if you want to see more of these videos, make sure you get all the information on how to improve. Make sure you subscribe down below. And also, because sometimes it can be a little ambiguous and it's not always the easiest thing to understand, if you have any questions, you can always join the Discord, DM me or one of the other people like the head admins and such, and we can look into explaining it better than this video. The first question that needs to be answered is, what do I mean when I say bounce? And for the most part, we're just going to focus on strafing from the start zone to the first ramp. What I mean by bounce is when you do a strafe, say right here, I'm going to strafe to the right. When I finish the strafe, how long it takes me to stop, so slow down my mouse to a complete stop and then speed it up in the opposite direction is what I refer to as bounce. People who don't have great bounce are people who don't have a strong rate of deceleration as they get towards the end of their strafe. So let's just say they're strafing to the right, and then before the end, instead of slowing down like to an instant stop almost, it takes them a while to slow down to it. Like that's exaggerated, but I'm just trying to get the idea across just for now. And also, the other part of not having great bounce is it takes too long to accelerate your mouse to the speed that you actually want to turn it in the opposite direction, which it kind of gives a sort of like swooshy feel to the strafes rather than like a clicky feel. So just to get an idea of what this looks like, is the strafes are kind of swooshy looking, like there's too much time, in my opinion, for great surf spent on the edges of the strafes, like from the junction between the strafe, as opposed to being as a bit more clicky. There's varying levels of how good people can be with how clicky their strafes are, but the idea is, in general, is as soon as we reach the point that we want to be at, we're supposed to go pretty much in the opposite direction almost instantly. We don't want to have any sort of noticeable deceleration and acceleration in the opposite direction. So hopefully I haven't completely butchered explaining what I mean when I say bounce. So we have a few examples that we can go over. We've got different surfers at different levels, so we can see how they all manage the edges of their strafes. The first example is Ruldar, who's rank 2 on KSF on Source, which means technically he's the second best surfer in the world. Another thing to consider is he's actually jumping from quite far back to get the extra height, So he's having to do a bit of a long jump, which means he's got to do his strafes a little bit more narrow and more rapid than some of the other examples, which makes it a little harder for him to be clicky. But as we can see here, all in all, it's quite decent clickiness. And if we just slow it down, then we can have a bit of a closer look at the edges of his strafes. You may have noticed in the Ruldar example is that he isn't perfectly clicky on the edges of his strafe. He's kind of like an 8 out of 10 when it comes to clickiness, but there is kind of diminishing returns as you improve your bounciness. So the second example that we have is Aimer, who's a bee-hopper, a top bee-hopper as far as I've been told. And we can see that he actually has quite a few pauses, like they're brief pauses, and remember this is in slow motion, at the edges of his strafe before he changes in the opposite direction. But that very small pause gives him enough time to change his key and still have fantastic synchronization. So we want to have as little noticeable deceleration to the point where we stop and change direction, change our key, and as little noticeable acceleration, like we want to almost be instantly at the correct speed that we want to be once we start going in the opposite direction. The third example that I'd like to show you is an up-and-coming surfer called Noti from Russia, and he, in my opinion, has very clicky strafes. They might be a bit too aggressive, but at least in terms of bounciness, he's pretty much nailing the bouncy aspect. So we can even slow it down and just focus on the edges of his strafes, and we can see that he doesn't spend much time at all changing from one direction to the other. So in the next example, I want to bring in some surfers who, they may not be the best surfers in the world, but they're certainly like intermediates or upper intermediates, so we can kind of have a comparison of the intermediate surfers versus the top surfers. In this example, I've got a friend of mine called Pinky, who I'm putting up against Oliver, who's well known for hitting some of he's had a couple of fantastic world records in 2018. So as we can see, just straight away, we can notice that Oliver's strafing more aggressively and he's got more bounce in the edges of his strafes. So we can put them side by side in slow motion. I know that Ollie has 5 strafes, I believe, rather than 3, but we can put them side by side and just have a quick look at the contrast in their bounciness. So I don't want to spend too long bashing this point home, but now we have some newer surfers. This was kindly done by DFS. I met him on, I believe it was Nexus on Mestro. So this is a demonstration of some newer surfers and how they handle the edges of their strafes. You should notice that they spend more time at the edge and it's a bit more swooshy. Back to some better surfers. So this is Tux. Recently smashing some records from the UK. Not the clickiest, but certainly decent. This is Josh. I believe he was rank 3 on KSF. He's got, in my opinion, some very clicky strafes. His aggressive strafes is what's helped him hit many a world record CP, I think. Now back to the upper intermediate class, we've got Bean and his strafes. Just have a quick look. And lastly, from upper intermediates again, Default. So we've gone through the examples and hopefully now we have a firm understanding of like the different levels of how bouncy a strafe can be at its edges. So I just want to quickly explain why it's important. This is only going to be verbal really. So the idea is, you should know already, if you don't that's fine, that you should be strafing pretty much all the time when you're surfing. You should almost spend no time not rotating. the entire time that you should be surfing or strafing on a map there should be mouse movement. So the idea is if you've got a lower rate of deceleration and acceleration at the edges of your strafe, then that's less time spent strafing at the optimal rate for speed gain. So let's just say if I've got bad deceleration, maybe I'm only optimal between there and there when I'm strafing between these 2 points. Did that even make a bullet hole? Come on, paint? Maybe not. Anyway, imagine that's how far I'm optimal, and then these edges I'm slower than optimal because I'm slowing down and speeding up not quick enough. But if I've got great bounce, it may be the case that I've got optimal for a wider range. This will transfer into gaining more units. The next question would be, how does somebody go about improving bounce? I don't think there's really much you can do to make it improve, apart from maybe one drill that I've thought of, and other than that, it's just generally when you're surfing, be focusing on the edges of your strafes and trying to make them more tight and clicky. However, I used to just use the start zone of beginner. It's a little cheesy just to isolate it just on its own, but this certainly improved my strafes. I would literally just go back and forth between these 2 points, and you can do it anywhere. You can do this on any map. Just find a map where there's 2 points that are quite distinct, and I'd go back and forth between them. So I'd make it so that when I got close to there, I wouldn't slow down much before I stopped. I'd try and go back in the opposite direction. Kind of. I'm probably going to do terrible examples, but here we go. It's been a while. Just about starting to make it work well. Maybe I'll play one of these in slow motion. Of course, like, this is something that everybody can improve on. It's something that I can improve on. It seems to be the case that as soon as you get so good at it, the extra skill in this area doesn't really translate into extra unit gain, because of the idea that you need that pause in order to switch a key. It seems to be the case that the way that most people, in my experience, gain bounciness on the edges of their strafes is by tensing their arm and being more jagged with their arm. And for me, this worked. I did this throughout like my second year and a lot of my third year also. But I find that having extra tension makes me a little less precise when doing boards and leaving ramps because I'm quite stiff. And also I think it's bad for the shoulder joint or whatever joint you're rotating through to be stiff all the time. So I don't know if you kind of have to go through a bit of a stiffer arm until you learn it, but I would certainly caution you, if you're going to tighten up your arm to be more jagged, then you run the risk of hurting your shoulder if you play a lot, etc. And you run the risk of having less precise boards and movement in general. Just secondly to that, so I did spend a lot of my second year and half of my third, or about 6 months ago was when I changed over. I started really focusing on just relaxing the arm, and as much as I've lost a bit of bounce, I haven't lost that much, and I feel like I'm still gaining pretty much the same amount of units, and I've got more precise and seem to be able to be more consistent over a longer period of time with surf, for example doing like a 2-minute map rather than a 40-second map. So the main thing I think that you should be working on is isolating this movement and just doing surf in various places, just focusing on just moving your mouse to the edge of your strafe and then coming back in the opposite direction with as much bounce as possible, or at least a high amount of bounce. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to join the Discord below, and we can even have a look at how you're doing it to see if we can say, yeah, you need to improve, or you're doing fairly well. Let me know down below in the comments if this is something that you already feel like you understand. or if this is completely new to you, let me know if it's been informative, and let me know what sort of thing you might want to learn about next, because there's a lot of concepts to break down in like a fundamental level and explain in detail. If there's anything else that you want me to do, just let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoy a video like this, please subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you get a notification when the next video comes out so you can see that, and feel free to follow me on Twitch as well. I'm not currently streaming, but I will be streaming casually in the coming weeks. So, bottom line, I really hope that this video has been helpful for you in improving your surf and beating your PRs. Let me know, DMs, comments, however, if this has helped you improve your ability and made you have lower times. I'd really appreciate knowing if this sort of video has helped some people out. That'd be really cool. Yeah, so just practice either the drill or just in general, just when you're surfing around, have a focus on moving your arm in a certain way to create that bounce on the edges of your strafes. So that's it for this one. I am back to uploading, so hopefully I'm going to get a video out every single week. That's going to include videos like the world record runs when I hit them, TASes, tutorials, etc., stuff like this. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.